are now out of the commander's portion of the review, and the next card on our list is, we're going to start with some of the white cards that are interesting that we thought we wanted to talk about. Obviously, this is very long, so we want to kind of not talk about, we're not going to talk about an exhaustive list, but anyhow. The next card on our list is Swift Reconfiguration, which is a cost 1 singular white mana to cast. It's an aura enchantment with flash that says enchant creature or vehicle. Enchanted permanent is a vehicle artifact with crew 5, and it loses all other card types. And it has the best flavor text of all time, which unfortunately the one in our notes doesn't have, but I have to share this because what it says, I don't know if you've seen this, Pongo. The flavor text on this card says, on the bright side, the bear now had cup holders.
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty excellent.
That is my favorite flavor text. That is so funny. But outside of being fantastic flavor text, we saw Sinestra talking about this on Twitter and talking about some of the stuff you could do with this card. So really, what are people thinking about with this Pongo?
I feel like Charles should be the person you're asking here.
Look, here. All right. I'll let you have a say. All I wanted to say, I'll let you explain why this card is good. All right. Because we already had these conversations already in our chat and all. But I was just reminded of this card earlier when we were talking about the jellyfish. And I thought it was really funny that you could turn the jellyfish into a vehicle so that you could equip a vehicle to your creature. It doesn't do anything. I just thought that was just really funny, and so then what's weird is that
the aura would fall off.
Yeah,
though.
So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, so does it? No, I don't think it falls off, right? Because you it's an equipment vehicle creature now.
Right, it doesn't lose its types. Yeah.
But then you
No, when you equip the jellyfish to a creature, the aura would fall off. Because then it's only
that's true. Equipment. That's funny.
Yeah.
So that would stop. It's only an equipment at that point.
Yeah, it stops being.
It stops being a creature.
Right.
Yeah.
Never mind. I just thought that was really funny that you could slap on multiple types onto a jellyfish now, because that text box can only fit so much.
Well, we certainly can do that.
Frickin' Arena.
Rest in peace, Arena.
If you play Arena on your phone with really any of these multiple type cards, good luck, man.
Arena is just going to be it's a shapeshifter now. It's easier.
So anyway, Pongo, take us through this card. Really, what's going on with a lot of these?
Yes. So I guess the surface reading of this card that most people will have is that it's a removal spell, which I actually disagree very, very strongly with this being a removal spell for a variety of reasons. A good example of why this is not particularly good as a removal spell would be for example, if you wanted to use this on a Najeela, because now you're facing a Najeela that it's a vehicle artifact and it's no longer a creature, but it still has its ability, both of its abilities. So as long as there's a warrior in play, or creatures that can connect, if you have a Grim Hireling or a Nature's Will, you don't necessarily need to just be netting warriors. And if you manage to get one attack in, then it's a moot point anyway. The activated ability is still there, so it doesn't have the same utility as a lot of these sort of white spells that are kind of the arrest type effects. That are going to stop attacking, but also more importantly, I think, and Charles would probably agree, at least in cEDH, wiping out abilities is so much more important than preventing the cards from attacking most of the time, just because there's so many decks that don't need to attack. And sure, something like a Tymna, you want your Tymna to attack. But if you put this on a Tymna, sure, the Tymna doesn't get to attack anymore, but who cares? Everything else attacks. So this is keeping your creatures around as almost as if they are, basically emblems at that point, if you want to look at it that way. And additionally, the other downside that people aren't talking about is if you do that, you've also increased the dockside count by 2.
Mm-hmm.
You put in an aura in deploy and you created an artifact, and that's like disastrous. Because +2 on a dockside can easily be like make or break. In any case, so this is really not a fantastic removal spell by my estimation. It hits some things, but anyway, it's like, dude, whatever.
This year is going to justify it's probably going to be a really strong justification for banning dockside, because we have like the Brothers War coming at the end of this year, which is another artifact heavy set.
Yeah, that's going to be probably a broken set, but anyway. So like what Callahan was saying before, and one of the things that Sinestra highlighted online on Twitter, things that we've been talking about are, this is a cool combo card, and you can combo this with Devoted Druid. This is a combo that's existed previously, but now this is by far the most efficient way of pulling off this combo.
Do it immediately, baby.
Yeah. You could do it with, I can't remember the name of the blue enchantment. Was it like one with the stars, or it was like something with the stars?
One with the stars that turns it into an enchantment, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Turning it into an enchantment, and then you can use your Devoted Druid, untap itself, and you can put as many -1/-1 counters on an enchantment as you want, and it won't die because it's not a creature. Same thing with vehicles. You can do the exact same thing. So you can net infinite green mana, at which point, if you are playing, for instance, like a Thrasios, you can get... Oh, my cat is just like meowing at me and screaming. I don't know if the microphone is picking that up. I can hear it. Yeah, she is very upset that I'm not giving her attention right now. So if you see me pick her up, it'll be because of that. So you can see her like, oh, there she is. As I was saying, you can pump all that mana into Thrasios and draw your deck like any of the infinite mana combos with Thrasios. Is that better than Scepter stuff? Maybe a little bit because of like the tutorability of creatures, but like,
I think where I will see it, like my plan is to use one with the stars and this in Arden Thrasios, which is something I've been trying to explore.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you can use those in a like, I think it's specifically compelling with Arden Thrasios. That cat is super cute, by the way. But I think this is a card that's very compelling with Arden in Arden Thrasios, which is yet to be a thing. But because of one, the Devoted Druid interaction, but two, the reason that you can use this to, if there's something that you're worried about attacking you that's been a problem, like a creature coming at you, you can deal with that, and then Arden can move it over once you're ready to do the thing.
Right.
Which makes it a more versatile card. I think that's really where I see it being good, honestly. It does, one thing that's funny that's in our notes, I don't know who put it in there, I bet it was Phoenix, but it does hose Esper Sentinel. Which is kind of funny.
I put that in. I wrote the notes for this card.
Okay.
And...
it does hose Esper Sentinel. That is flipping hilarious.
That's funny, but like 1 mana removal for a 1 mana spell feels bad.
You could see if you like look at my Twitter, I've had discussions about this. I've also had discussions about this when playing with Power. I'm also in agreement with Pongo. I don't see this as a removal spell. It's more of a utility spell. Mm-hmm. There are certain creatures that you could like stick this on if you don't want to take combat damage from it or something like that. But and you can also use this to dodge like a board wipe, like a Toxic Deluge, and you want to keep like, Archon of Emeria in play, or you just use it as like a Summoning Sickness remover effect for like your Devoted Druid combo
for activated abilities.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it was really interesting that you guys just went through a bunch of cards, like one with the stars and this, and it just kind of, and that style of like sticking an aura onto a creature, making it untap and tap, just reminded me of like, this adds to the density of combos for like band style decks with like Faber Alder and what's that blue enchantment that has like 1 blue untap enchanted creature, and
like Pemin's Aura type of
Pemin's Aura type effects and things like
Freed from the Real.
Freed from the Real.
Freed from the
exactly.
Real is the one people play.
Yeah, Freed from the oddly enough, also from the original Kamigawa, right? And so,
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a Scott M. Fisher one too, because I recall the art and it seemed like a Scott M. Fisher style art. But you have, yeah, and so it's interesting because now you have a bunch of these creatures that generate mana by tapping, and then you have these auras that, you know, allow you to cheat this restriction of tapping only once and doing it multiple times, right? And I'd be very interested to see if like people would build decks like around that, like especially like I go back to thinking Light Pulse, but then I just realized that Light Pulse only enchants herself, which sucks. Like if she could enchant other things from the auras that you tutor, that'd be even great, because then you can have this, you know, scenario where you play one aura on one combo piece to trigger to find another aura on another combo piece at the same time, and your opponent is like literally overloaded from having to deal with two threats at the same time, which is pretty good. But that's not what Light Pulse does, and we're not really going to be talking about her anyway. But yeah, it's just, it's nice in terms of like density of options. It's also very fast, like incredibly fast. And yeah, like the only times it really functions as like a removal spell in, at least in cEDH, is if it can make the ability obsolete. And what's funny is that if you stick it on Esper Sentinel, the ability will trigger, it just won't do anything. Like what's funny is that you can choose not to pay and your opponent will draw the card.
That's funny.
That's hilarious.
You choose not to pay 0 mana. Yeah.
I pay 0. I don't pay 0. You draw a card.
I mean, hey, they can crew 5 their Esper Sentinel.
Yeah.
And draw a card.
Yeah, they can respond to
that seems big.
They can respond to the trigger and crew their creature, and then as the trigger is resolving, now Esper Sentinel has a power and toughness that it will check.
Yeah, that would be a real gotcha moment, wouldn't it?
But all right, I think we're done with this card.
Yeah.
Let's.
I would agree with that. The next card on our list is this was one of the cards that Pongo is, I'm not sure if it's going to stay in Arden Crom, but we're testing it, is Cloudsteel Kirin. It is a 3/2 artifact creature equipment Kirin that costs 2 colorless and a white, that has flying, and it says equipped creature has flying and in quotation marks, you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game, and it costs Reconfigure 5. So Charles, the thought process is within the Arden community, this is a good card in Arden because Arden cheats the Reconfigure cost and gives you a 3 mana Platinum Angel. What is your take on this card? I know you've talked a lot about the design of like this type of effect on an equipment, but what do you think this is like worth it? What are your thoughts on it?
So it's a 3 mana Platinum Angel. Gideon of the Trials is also a 3 mana Platinum Angel. Like, do you see cEDH players playing Gideon of the Trials? Right. There's a major difference though, is that Gideon of the Trials doesn't seem particularly lucrative in a table where literally everyone can attack Gideon. And this goes back to what I was talking about with Shorikai being something that's very difficult to interact as a non-creature permanent, right? And so having a Platinum Angel effect on a creature for 3 mana is, you know, that can be like a major distinction between this and Gideon of the Trials. But you would have to like see how it works. In my opinion, having played Gideon of the Trials before in the past during like the Flash Hulk meta, it's a little bit different because nowadays when people are doing like breach combos, they're going to find a bounce spell to just bounce it, right? Yep. And at that point, you know, you're just like, okay. And that was like one of the reasons why people subbed out of Gideon of the Trials, because it was no longer very effective anymore. Whereas before, when there was that Flash Hulk meta, you know, they had to get rid of this before they just, you know, removed their entire library. And that made sense, right? But we're seeing decks now where, you know, people are storming off and they have access to multiple options that they can interject in the middle of their storm line that makes Gideon not particularly relevant. I talked about cards with this design I'm happy that this card exists, but this is not actually necessarily the card that I'm looking for. Like I had an original tweet about this where I talked about, hate bearer effects. And I listed out like 4 different kinds I was looking for. One of which was like an either Sworn Canonist Rule of Law style or like a Thalia effect. Right. I did not mention about a Gideon of Trials effect, but I am very happy that this card exists because I think this and the Jellyfish are like equipable static abilities. Right. And that's something that like people need to now be aware about is that equipments don't just make your creatures bigger or have like, combat related effects. It literally just transforms your creature into like an inverse advantage effect. Either like imagine if there's a green equipment in a later set, like maybe even Brothers War, where it turns your creature into a Seedborn Muse, right? Or it turns or a Prophet of Krufix, right? Like it's not unreasonable to see that, especially now when we have Future Sight on an equipment and a Platinum Angel on an equipment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's one of those things where I haven't got a game in with it yet. So I don't actually know how this is going to function in a game. You know what I mean? Like, because the obvious thing is you want to play it with like Arden, and I know a lot of people are talking with like Arden Tana. Obviously, I'm testing it in Arden Crom, but what the question will end up being is this worth the 3 mana slot?
I think,
and that's ultimately going to be the question because somebody deals with Arden somehow. Now you just have a 3/2 flyer, and
I think,
you know what I mean? And was that worth it?
I think that, like I said, it's a very distinct difference between this being something that your opponents cannot interact with their creatures, right? They actually have to spend cards to do it, right? Whereas with Gideon, you would always just like Crom flies and swings and kills Gideon, right? Like Crom flies and swings it, but it doesn't actually kill Arden unless you decide to block, like, I don't know, an idiot or something. But like, but the point is that your opponent actually has to play a spell to get rid of it, and you're in like, especially in Arden Crom, you're in the colors like Deflecting Swat,
and you're playing Rule of Law,
Deflecting Swat, Mother of Runes, like so many things that you could just be doing, just a straight up counter spell now, right? So it's much more defensible when you have a 3 mana Platinum Angel, right? And so it fits a specific niche only in Arden, right? That you are figuring out through playtesting, and you have to really think about like who you're playing against, how they, think about it interacting. I will definitely say that if people just look at this and compare it to just Gideon the Trials, they're missing an important fact that this has over Gideon, which is the fact that, whereas with Gideon, you can always just swing Crom at it and you're fine. This, you literally do need to play a card.
Or Timno. Yeah. Really, it really didn't matter what, right? Like you could swing anything
but
at it.
When it comes to the end game and someone's comboing off, this is not going to be the thing that stops them. It's the Rule of Law that really stops the Storm deck. But once they start storming off, right, this effect becomes trivial, unless if you have interaction and they do not have unlimited resources, right?
I think what'll be interesting is to see is how this, particularly in what I want to see this in a matchup with, is with like Thassa's Oracle and like the Thassa's Oracle DC combo, and how it makes those decks have to maneuver around it. I'm still not sold on it. I'm testing it because I kind of have to, but the next card on this list I am sold on, and I can tell you that just from looking at it. This card is bananas, which is Lion Sash. It is a 1/1 artifact creature equipment cat. Remember again, equipment is not, say it with me folks, equipment is not a creature type. It costs 1 colorless and a white, and it has an activated ability and a static ability. Its activated ability costs 1 white to activate, and it exiles target card from a graveyard. If it was a permanent card, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or on Lion Sash. Equipped creature, its static ability, equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash. So this is Scavenging Ooze but better in a way that also pumps your other creatures or can pump a creature. Like, this is like, what's your, like, when we look at this, Pongo, like, this is a white staple, right? Like in low color white decks.
Yeah, you have to be in low color white decks. It's not like better than Scoos, just to be clear. It's different. You know, we could list like the relative lists of pros and cons. I think if you're playing a green white deck, chances are you're going to want Scoos over this specifically. But I do love the design of this card. And as soon as you're no longer in green, you're like really happy to have this card. In particular, if you're playing kind of like a slower, more attrition-y, hate bearsy oriented deck. So I think
in an equipment style deck, who would be doing that these days, though?
I mean, like, you don't even need to equip this card, which is like the main thing that I like about it, actually. But no, I think that this is a slam dunk of a design, first of all. I'm not going to get too much into that aspect because I could, talk about that at length. And people have heard me say how much I love white card designs, I think, ad nauseum at this point. But yeah,
No, that's a black card.
Yeah. To your point, though, this is a great get for those white decks. And it's efficient enough that I expected to see play. And it's cool that you can protect it from like board wipes and creature removal and stuff like that as well by reconfiguring it.
I'm trying not to talk about Arden Crom constantly, but it's really hard with this set because the set just gave me
a lot to think about.
A ton of new cards to have to talk about and think about because it's just like half the set was like built for that deck specifically. It felt like.
Then give me a moment. Then give me a moment and talk about what Pongo had just said about green white, because I think Pongo was hinting at something, and I want to elaborate on that a little bit more. A lot of green white designs are very creature centric. Like you look at something like Gaddock Teague, right, which is pretty creature centric. Hoses a lot, Expels
or Catilda.
Or Catilda, yeah, like the green white Catilda and stuff like that, or even like I forgot the new cleric that they printed that is also very creature centric. It's the reason why you would want to play Scoos, because there's more synergies with creatures in green white than there is in Boros, which has a more equipment focus, artifact focus axis. Right. And so that's what sort of Pongo is hinting at. The other thing is to also consider like the typing, right? Equipments are easily tutorable in white. Like Stoneforge Mystic into this, you flash it in. That's one of the things why we mentioned about low white decks is because if you're running, white and you don't necessarily have green, right? This becomes a really wonderful option for you. But if you have green, right, the reason why you would want to play Scoos is because green also has Collector Oof, right? And this being an artifact kind of is a nombo with Collector Oof, whereas you can hit like different axes with graveyard artifacts with this, right? And so there's also some really weird stuff going on here where like you can play Cursed Totem and then equip this onto a creature, or I guess you use Arden to have this attached onto a creature.
You would have to equip it first, but
yeah. And you can do that through Arden's triggered ability, and then you have a Cursed Totem, and you can now activate its ability through a Cursed Totem as well. And so there are some very like differentiating aspects. But what's interesting is that we talked about this offline about how weird it is for green cards to want certain white cards and white cards to want certain green cards. This is like a good moment in Magic where they printed a card in the right color, right? And that the color could actually like use. Like one of the examples that we had talked about before offline was like, green gets all these enchantment card draw effects, but it's not like green actually has enchantments that like it really like it has a good few like Carpet of Flowers and Spirit of the Labyrinth, but like white has like these rule of laws that it wants to play. White has humility. White has moat, right? White has these things. White has like really powerful enchantments, but none of like the enchantresses, right? And so it's like white.
Because that's like Mesa Enchantress.
Yeah,
right? Like,
but that's like 1, whereas green has like 5. White literally, I mean, green
Right.
even has an enchantment that is an Enchantress, right? It was just a non-creature enchantment that's an enchant, like Enchantress's presence, right? And so this is like one of those moments where, you know, they did print a card that's very useful to white that works with everything else that white is doing. And at the same time, it doesn't necessarily invalidate SKUs, because what SKUs wants to do for any deck that's running green is that it also encourages you to play the other green cards as well.
Right. No, it's a really exciting card. It was a very well designed card. One important thing to note with this is it does trigger Winota. So, Ian. Next card on our list as we move on is March of Otherworldly Light. It is an instant that costs X1 and also says, as an additional cost to cast the spell, you may exile any number of white cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. And then it says, exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment with a mana value X or less. So, Charles, when we look at this, this reads sort of like it reads kind of like a mixture of things, right? Like a sort of like a prismatic ending mixed with one of the like those creatures from Modern Horizons 2. It's got a lot going on.
It does have a lot going on. So first of all, the marches, I believe, are a throwback to the Shoal cards from Betrayers of Kamigawa. So for those of you who don't know that little trivia, you can look at the Shoal cards. They used to have an impact in Modern. I don't think they really do anymore. But yeah, back in the day, they were pretty awesome. And it's great to see, this type of text coming back. It circumvents a bit of I think that we might not see the last of this design because, you're not really exiling a card to cast this for free like you would with the cycle of elementals from Modern Horizons, like Solitude or Endurance. But, you are basically paying for X. And as you said, Callahan, I get this a lot from a lot of people telling me about this, like, oh, they printed Prismatic Ending as an instant. This is amazing, right? And yeah, I think that overall this card is pretty great. I think that, Hinata really likes this card, and any card that, does like the whole cost reduction thing. I think it's also really nice because, in Death and Taxes, like if you're playing Thalia, this could potentially just cost 1 white, even and function like that Source of Plowshares in a way. So overall, I think this is good. I'm playing this in like quite a few of my white decks now and testing it out. I think it's pretty powerful, because given this meta, like X is usually like 3 and below. Yeah, it's like I don't know really much else to say about this card.
Having the utility to be able to hit more than just a creature is
nice.
nice.
It is very, very, very nice.
Which is kind of why Prismatic Ending is so like widely seen, right, in Modern, is because it's able to be this like very versatile removal for a lot of different things.
Obviously,
I think
this is the mono white guy.
There's a pretty important difference there, though. Like, this is going to be less efficient than Prismatic Ending in a lot of situations, short of having like extra white cards that you can pitch. Which I think
I was
is
saying,
an important distinction. I mean, obviously, there's the fact that it doesn't hit Planeswalkers, but that's irrelevant for us. But
well, I was saying that like as someone who just plays mono white, this is pretty good for me because I can't actually ever really spend other colors into Prismatic Ending. But no, I like Pongo's definitely got a point about like the flexibility of it. Also, like it's the difference between an instant and a sorcery, right? And so there are like pros and cons in that regard. But yeah,
absolutely. I think
Well, the next card on...
Yeah, it's a good mono white card, but or low color white deck card, but it's not going to be efficient enough for most decks with white in higher colors.
Mm-hmm.
Next card on our list is a card that I've already done a video about, talked about it, and I'm really excited about it, is Anchor to Reality. It is a 2 colorless and 2 blue sorcery that says, as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Then you search for your library for an equipment or vehicle card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. If it has mana value less than the sacrificed permanent's mana value, scry 2. So, effectively, Pongo, this is natural order for equipment and vehicles.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it is closer to natural order, I suppose, because it's 4
Everybody
mana.
compared it to
Everyone's
Tinker,
talking
but
about
like
Tinker.
I was like, after I made that video and I thought about it more, I was like, this is a lot closer to natural order.
I mean, only given that it costs 4, right? But then like you could look at like other differences. Like it doesn't ask you to sacrifice a blue artifact, or
Right.
it doesn't ask you to sacrifice an equipment to find an equipment, or a vehicle to find a vehicle. No, it's a cool card, jokes aside. And I'm glad that it lets you sacrifice kind of common card types like artifacts and creatures to find sort of the more niche ones. At 4 mana, it's starting to maybe be like a little inefficient, just kind of given the fact that not a lot of decks are necessarily like scrambling to get equipment into play or vehicles into play. There are a few that are really happy to have that, like you were saying, for Arden, for instance. If you are going to be playing, kind of like what I had been discussing with you the other day, the sort of like the Arden Godo type deck that tries to play more like bottoms for Helm of the Host. Then this is really cool there in that specific context, because you're not reliant just on Godo to find the Helm. I think this is a really cool design. It's limited by the fact that 4 mana is pretty steep, and also the fact that it's like finding fairly niche card types. So it's a very safe card for them to have printed. Yeah. But it's a really cool one to see because of, like you said, it evokes comparisons to other really, really powerful cards.
And it feels like a void too, though. You know what I mean? Like it does, like, for the decks that want this, it's going to be really good in those decks.
Sure.
And it's not going to just turn into this like universal tutor that's going to go into like every blue deck. You know what I mean? Like It fills a very specific role. And I like that specifically for tutors.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And, the sort of last thing I wanted to say about it is, compared to something like Tinker or compared to something like Natural Order, we don't yet have the equipment or vehicle payoff that breaks this card. But conceivably, a card like that could get printed one day, at which point this becomes a card more easily compared to both of those. As of right now, we don't have a Crater Hoof or like an old Gnawbone, or, even just like an Avenger of Zendikar type card for vehicles / equipment. And obviously we don't have like a Bolas's Citadel equivalent.
Right.
So, maybe one day this card becomes like really quite broken. But for now, we're just waiting for that day.
I can see this as a Shorikai Secret Commander card, where you get your Dramatic Scepter line up, but you don't have Shorikai out. But then you have, infinite mana at this point, and you just cheat out Shorikai, and it's like, look at that.
I think the closest thing to that we currently have would be getting like a Cauldron Complete, right? But that feels like pretty. You're playing a card that's easily counterable, compared to a Stoneforge Mystic at 2 mana, where your Cauldron is uncounterable after. Like,
I mean, it's
not quite good enough.
I think I think in Modern specifically, you're going to see this like going to get like Cauldron for sure. But where I think this is really good, like especially with like Ardennes, is being able to get some of the combo-y cards for it. Like you were saying, like Helm of the Host, but you can also get like Ember Cleave, which is part of the like commander damage package. Like that, in the fact that it puts it onto the battlefield, I think is like huge. And so like if you have Sigarda's 8 out already, it triggers that, and so it automatically attaches to the creature you want. There's just like a lot of or Hammer of Nazan if you play that.
So what I'll say is that going to my prophecy of future hate bear equipments, or like just static ability equipments, like a Prophet, a Crufix equipment, like if we see those, they aren't like end game like payoffs, but this becomes a much more powerful tutor, because already you could use this to grab your future sight Jellyfish if you want in Ardent Crom, right? And that seems really good, right? Like Helm of the Host, I don't know, because it's like, well, you just play Godo, you know, like what's this between you just casting Godo and winning? And so I think that there's more justification for future equipment creatures on the line, or just equipments in general that just have this ability that grants your creature a very powerful static ability, like a Seaborn Muse effect, like even something like a Carpet of Flowers effect. Like think about all these like enchantments and artifacts that weren't, you know, on a creature get printed as an equipment that says a quick creature now has this ability, right? Possibilities are pretty endless with this. I will say then that I will also agree with Pongo that regardless of however busted of an equipment that you have, like imagine they have Omniscience as an equipable creature, the 4 mana is still a steep cost, even with like especially with like the double blue pips, right? Because I think like
I mean that's why you don't see like that in part is why you don't see natural order. Played a whole lot, right?
And so like that makes sense to everything about how this card is designed. I think that this card being costed 4 mana, also requiring double blue pips instead of a single blue pip, which actually does matter when you look at like the suite of blue cards being played in cEDH. A lot of them only typically have 1 blue in their cost. Like this is some with a few minor exceptions that are just game winning cards like Horror and Tyrant, but which you don't even cast. But like the thing, but like the thing is that I think they did future proof this card for later designs that are coming down the assembly line. So yeah,
it definitely feels like they were like playing this card safe. Like this could have very easily gone and got like an artifact in general.
No,
you know what I mean? No. And that would have been insane.
I mean, look, we already had a card that did that, and that was banned in Commander. I'm pretty sure that they weren't going to print another one like it.
Yeah. Well, we don't need more Tinker. That's my point. Is this felt like very reserved in the grand scheme. Like this feels good. This feels about like on rate for what it should do. I really like this card, and I'm really excited about it for Ardent Crom because it's a good tutor, and I like more tutors. Next card on our list is another March. This is March of Swirling Mist, which it's the same thing as the White March, whereas an additional cost to cast the spell, you may exile any number of blue cards from your hand, and it makes it cost 2 less for each exiled card, and it's the next one. And it says, up to X target creatures phases out. First of all, they've been using phasing so much more recently, and I love the way that they use it. But outside of that, when we look at this card, Charles, and what these marches are doing, and like you said, they were evoking the shoals from Betrayers. This card, in particular, is much better than the other marches.
Yes. So,
because you can use it in a lot of ways.
We talked about it and hinted at this march earlier when we talked about Hinata. Like, this is very, very powerful with Hinata. And also, just the rate for it is just vastly... like, it just doesn't feel fair, honestly. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, your March of Otherworldly Light, in order to hit one target you have to spend how much to do it. Whereas like March of Swirling Mist, especially in a format as fast as cEDH, like you don't really care if like the thing is going to come back. You just care that you get it out of the way. I mean, like I could see this like having an effect similar or like a utility similar to Cyclonic Rift in some ways. And here's the other thing that's also very interesting, is that unlike a Cyclonic Rift, because I've been in a few games before where someone had to emergency Cyclonic Rift, not Cyclonic Rift and win the game, but more like, okay, this person is going to kill me with lethal Winota damage, right? And I gotta just Cyc Rift now. I'm not winning, but at least I'm not dead, right? And the Winota player, when they rebuild the board, might not be able to play all their stack pieces again. Instead, they'll play certain ones, and you might be upset that they didn't play the ones that you really cared about. And the reason why I mentioned this is because phasing is a lot different from just bouncing something. And it also has a huge impact on turn order, right? Because they don't phase back in until the person's on tap step. And so there's a whole like play line now to think about when you use this card, because it will function very differently from how you think about bounce spells. Because you might phase it out, phase, a couple of stacks creatures at the end of someone else's turn. And if you don't go off, right, the next person who comes after you might also not be able to go off or will be able to go off depending on how the turn order is structured and how creatures are being phased back in, right? And that's something that like I'm not sure that people completely realize yet about like the nuance of phasing versus just bouncing, right? It has like, this is a card that I think in some ways will make you think about turn order structure in the middle of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. This is one of those cards that I have a pretty hard time evaluating, actually. I'm like uncertain whether this card is one that we should be like fairly strongly considering in like kind of a decent amount of decks, or if it like is not actually good enough in the vast majority of decks. It's interesting because like the places where you would kind of expect it to maybe be like kind of a shoe-in, in a lot of respects are maybe even the places where it's at its worst, because only dealing with a thing temporarily is not necessarily what you want to be doing when you're playing, let's say, like a slower kind of like low color blue deck. If we imagine like a Lavinia, or if we imagine like a Timna, not a Timna Crom, sorry, a Crom Arden, just phasing like a good amount of creatures out is not especially fantastic. Like you really kind of just want them like gone. Right. But then, where does this card have a home? Well, presumably, this is like the card that's supposed to be like, stacks players are in shambles, because it's just gonna, like selectively wipe out the hate bears, the ones that you care about, and let you go off, kind of like you were saying, Charles. And so the problem there is that we already have Dress Down as a card, and it's unclear that this is like better than Dress Down in, a lot of decks. Some decks obviously kind of can't really win through Dress Down, so it's not really an option. I'm intrigued by the card and want to like maybe give it a shot in Najeela, because like you can phase out some creatures and then, you have a clear path for swinging, which is kind of the equivalent of like, what we were talking about before. Either it gets you on the board such that when the creatures come back, it's irrelevant, or else, you've cleared a path and you can win, which is intriguing. But, it is possible still that, for like a lot of these decks, the raid is not going to be quite good enough.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like crazy to say, right? Because like, like it can be 3 mana, get rid of like 2 things, or like 1 mana and a blue card kind of temporarily get rid of 2 things. So I don't know, like the card currently is giving me like fits. I kind of just need to see it in action a little bit.
That's kind of where I'm at with it, because especially in like Art and Crumb, right, is you look at it and the immediate thing is, well, you want to use this to deal with something that's getting in your way. I think it is going to end up being in those low color decks a way to get around like cyclonic rifts and mass board destruction.
Like protect your own stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I think it's going to end up
It's
being more of
intriguing.
a protection spell because of the fact that you can phase it, and especially with like equipment style decks, right? With Arden, is because it keeps those.
Yeah, the equipment phases out with the creature,
right? So I think in that regard, I like it because of the fact. So like, let's say somebody uses one of the channel lands to try and blow up some of my things on Arden, I can phase this out real quick. And I think that is where I see it being more useful than in the offensive place. And unfortunately, because of these channel lands, now Arden Crom and Arden decks in general are going to be having to slot in Giver of Runes and all the, like, specifically Giver of Runes because it protects from colorless, or blacksmith skill or something along these lines of these types of cards to protect your stuff, because otherwise you're just kind of like, well, I can't do much about that.
We can talk about that when we get to Boseiju.
Yeah.
Which is probably like,
but
the reason I'm bringing that up is because that's specifically where I see this card being more useful in those low color decks, is in protecting your cards, less in using it offensively.
Yeah, and I think
I do think this is one of the coolest cards that like they printed in this set.
I absolutely agree, because
you're right, like in highlighting the fact that this has defensive applications as well, and that just makes this card really, really intriguing. So I'm excited to try it out, and I'm excited to see people trying it out. I'm just like still not 100%
not sure
how it's going,
because it's so unique. Yeah. It's like it's hard to compare it to other things too, right?
Yeah.
It's just a very new effect.
This was like the same problem that I had with Hinata in the same way, right? And so
it's bananas in Hinata.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
But still, the application and execution of this card, like where does it go, and that kind of effect, right? But that's something that, like, from like a brewer's perspective, I think is very exciting. The other thing is because I think like someone's in the comments going to be like, well, we already have Teferi's protection, and that phases things out. And like this goes into like more of the nuance or minutia of it, that, you know, Teferi's protection is like binary. It's, you know, all your stuff, whereas you could still keep the rule of law effect out and protect something else, right? And that's actually something that's really important.
Right. It gives you more choice for sure.
Yeah. Well, next card on our list is Imposter Mech. It is a vehicle artifact that costs 1 colorless and a blue. When it is a vehicle and it's crewed, it is a 3/1. Follow me here. It says you may have Imposter Mech enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it's a vehicle artifact with crew 3 and it loses all other card types. And then it also has crew 3 because of the fact that it says you may. So Pongo, when we look at this card right away, it's like vehicle phantasmal image kind of.
Yeah, I don't actually love that comparison.
I mean, that's like the closest thing in my head I can compare it to.
Well, because of the 2 CMC, I understand that. But the biggest issue with that comparison is that this only hits things your opponents control, right? And that's like a major, major downside. If you've played like a good amount of Phantasmal Image, you know, we're not just jamming that into like literally every deck in the hopes of like copying people's, you know, Timnas or whatever. You know, most of the time you want to be playing like your own dockside. And then sort of at minimum, you've got the option of copying your own dockside with a Phantasmal Image. And then, you know, Phantasmal Image has additional use, right? Where it can copy your opponent's things if necessary. But additionally, you know, it can still copy your other powerful creatures that you're playing. So like you do want to be playing, I feel like, good creatures as well to kind of ensure that you are going to find targets for your clone effect. This runs into the issue of what if I can't find good targets for my clone effect? Such that like I'm not really convinced that I want to actually play this in all that many places. You know, some people are talking about it maybe in like the like Poly Kraken style decks, because it's sort of like a way where you can get additional creatures. And that makes sense to me. I think that's a reasonable place for this card because it's a way to get additional creatures without having to actually put creatures into your deck. Obviously, like the one point of tension there is that it's not actually a creature until you can crew 3. So you're not just like copying their creature and then sacrificing this to like tutor up your Kraken. So you kind of have to have the creature in play anyway. So, you know, you have to imagine that you have to evaluate whether or not you feel that is like the chance that my opponents are going to have a good creature that I can copy high enough that it warrants running this card over like the next best blue card. And there's like a lot of competition for slots in blue decks because blue cards are broken. So it's
one thing I will say is I think I like this a little bit more. God, I can't stop talking about Art and Chrome. I'm sorry. It just
it's the new Lavinia.
Well, it's the new Lavinia, but it's also just like it's a new archetype that I feel like is emerging right now. Is like these Art and X decks that people are starting to talk about.
And
you're welcome, world.
And this set gave those decks a lot.
Yeah, it gave them a lot. But I think it makes like the rationale I have with it, and I'm testing it in Art and Chrome, so I have no idea if this is going to work or not. It's the idea that having Phantasmal Image in your deck, you can't like equip things to it, so you can't get Arden triggers on it. There's a lot of downside to Phantasmal Image with Arden and equipment, and Imposter Mech has the benefit of being able to, one, pitch to Force of Will, Force of Negation, Misdirection, those sorts of cards, or March of, all those sorts of things. But it can also just be the best card your opponents are playing. So you're playing against a Tymna deck, now you get extra card draw.
Kodama.
Is that worth the 2 mana? I don't know.
It's more the opportunity cost, right? Because as someone, I play a lot of Phantasmal Image, and it's not unusual for whatever reason that you have your Phantasmal Image in your hand, and it just so happens to be the day that your opponents just decide that they have better things to do than develop their Tymnas, or like for whatever reason the Kodama player had like a bad start. And they're not like casting Kodama anytime soon, and you're kind of just sitting there like, when am I going to get the most value out of this Phantasmal Image? Yeah. So when you're playing creatures that you're happy to copy is when it's like, as I was saying before, that's when it's at its most consistent. But yeah,
I forgot about the fact that it can only copy your opponent's creatures, but yeah, that makes a huge difference between it and Phantasmal Image. If it could copy any creature, man, this is just a better.
Oh my god,
yeah.
This would be better Phantasmal Image.
It would be better than Phantasmal Image. I think that, once again, it's harping on me talking about the fact that it's not a creature, and so it dodges a lot of things that would affect creatures otherwise. Like, imagine if like Thrasios just came down as a 2 mana like artifact that you could just activate, and it's immune to like Toxic Deluge and things like that. Or like, nowadays I see people playing Dam or Winds of Abandon, right? And like, imagine if you just had a Kinnan that just, was there all the time and your opponent had to like abrade it or die.
Yeah.
Right. Static abilities, I think.
Abrade it or die.
I mean, it's fair. That's literally playing against Kinnan.
Yeah. It's like, that's the thing that I could see this fit into, but the fact that it can only copy your opponent's stuff now brings to the question, like, what am I to do with this Kinnan? I didn't build a Kinnan deck, right? And so, like, if you copy it...
Well, here's the one counter to that, though, is because you're not going to be copying Kinnan with this because of the legend rule, right? Like, it's... you're not going to be able to copy Kirin.
Wait, is it non-legendary?
Well, you can't have 2 Kinins. No, but you could copy. Yeah. You could get your first.
No. Wait, hold up. You can copy this.
Can copy legendary.
Yeah, it can copy legendary creatures. Like you can have 2 Kinins out, honestly, with this because the other Kinin is not a creature, right? It's the Imposter Mech that's a vehicle. Until you crew it, that's when the legend rule applies, right?
That I'm not sure about.
I don't think it applies there. I think it's just the name.
Oh, the card has to have the same name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm almost positive it's
an interesting one. I'm not actually. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can put a sign here and post of like
vigorously comment to let us know.
I forget about that, but no, I think you're right. And if a permanent shares a name with another, right, then the legend rule applies.
I think that's right. But
okay.
I'm not looking.
Yeah, regardless, because we would have to open up like the big fat comprehensive rules. But regardless of the fact, it's more of like the strategy for how you play it and how you position yourself. And again, as what Pongo says, the opportunity cost. I think that there is a benefit to a clone that isn't a creature that copies other creatures' abilities, right? And there's like that corner to leverage in. But the kind of deck that would almost want to run it, I feel like has to be like kind of like a Kenrith deck in some ways, right? Where it could just kind of do a little bit of everything and it's very like fluid in its play style. Because the funny thing is that I feel like this card's favorite target would be someone's Kenrith, oddly enough. Or I mean, the other favorite target is someone's Dockside, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to hope they don't win after resolving their Dockside.
Yeah. And that's kind of my thought with this though too, is because in a deck like Arden Crom, you're not really interested in copying like your own Dockside because you're not going to be doing that like multiple times. You're more interested in copying stuff like Stoneforge Mystic if you're going to be doing that.
Copying your own stuff.
And you don't play a high enough density of creatures to like be like, oh man, Phantasmal Image is an auto include in here, right? Because you can copy your own stuff and other people's. And also the fact that you try to equip your Phantasmal Image and
also with
which is a big nombo.
Yeah. And with Kenrith, I would rather have drawn Phantasmal Image because then I can just loop it with Dockside. Yeah.
Piece, sort of. Yeah.
All right. I think we're done with this card. Let's move on.
It's an interesting one. But I feel like maybe a little overhyped. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next card on our list is a card called Prosperous Thief. It is a 3/2 human ninja that costs 2 colorless and a blue with the ninjutsu ability that costs 1 colorless and a blue. What it says is whenever one or more ninjas or rogue creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. So Charles, it says Grim Hireling in our notes. I think that's not what it is at all. This is Malcolm for ninjas and rogues.
Yeah,
right?
I thought it was like a Grim Hireling as well for a sec, but I just had to reread this and then reread Malcolm. And, you're right. It's more closer to a Malcolm, but it's also kind of weird because Malcolm works with any type of damage. I don't know Yuriko too well, and typically black isn't really damage centric. It's usually like loss of life. So I would assume that Yuriko doesn't do damage either. She just causes players to lose life. And even then, I had to read this card a couple times over. It's also combat damage instead of regular damage. So it's like really hard for me to place about like how good this is for Yuriko in terms of like how frequently this trigger occurs and how many treasures you can generate with it. I do like the fact that it does give you treasures because I feel like in my experience seeing Yuriko get played, like I've watched Cobblepot play Yuriko before during the MLC, I think, or not during the MLC, but during like one of our games. And mana seems to be like a huge issue for Yuriko. And this helps like massage that type of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
When you look at this, what are your immediate thoughts? Like what deck do you see? Like other than Yuriko, do you see this really hitting anywhere? Pongo.
Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily run this anywhere else. I can't think of with the exception of Edric, any deck that is kind of playing like a good number of rogues. Mm-hmm. The issue here with Edric in particular being that this is a 3-drop without evasion. So I'm not convinced that, it's necessarily going to be quite good enough or on plan enough. That being said, maybe just getting 3 extra treasures a turn is good enough, even as a 3-drop. That, would require you to have 3 evasive rogues, so maybe not. But, I don't know that we're going to see this card necessarily in anywhere but Yuriko to start, maybe over time.
Is there like a rogue commander somewhere that might be interested in this?
What's interesting is that there is a rogue with evasion that is currently getting played in cEDH, which is Dothy Voidwalker. I just looked it up. It is a rogue and it has shadow, which is nice. But it's like, you're not going to, bend over like,
No, you need your commander or ninja.
Yeah, you're not.
Pretty much.
You can't really rely on that, and that's just too much. Like, I don't know like how deep of a density we are right now with commander staples. Like I actually had to think about like how many other rogues have we is cEDH staples like that we're running. Like there's Dothy Voidwalker, there's Opposition Agent, right? And I can't really think of anything else other than those 2 rogues, Like you would actually have to think about your deck composition, like, because if it just so incidentally that you have a bunch of ninjas and rogues in your deck, then this card actually feels fine simply because of the fact that you don't really have to do anything. But if you're bending over backwards to get this to work, right, then you should really not even be considering this card, I think.
Right.
Yep. This is a Yuriko card.
Makes sense to me. Next card on our list looks like another Yuriko card that's Thousand Face Shadow. It's a cost 1 blue, and it's 1/1 with ninjutsu of 2 colorless and blue that has flying. And when it enters the battlefield from your hand, if it's attacking, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. The token enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. So Pongo, obviously this is in Yuriko. Anywhere else?
I don't think so. Again, the interesting thing about this card is that it's a 1-drop and it's a ninja, and then that's and the flying. But then that other ability, the triggered ability, is kind of just like extra, like it's like a little bonus. I don't know that it actually matters a whole lot of the time. It's you're happy to have it because why not, right? Like it's the cherry on top. But ultimately you're just kind of happy to have an additional 1-drop with the ninja typing. So that you can ninjutsu this out for Yuriko and then replay it later and, have it essentially draw you a card every time it attacks from that point on. Right. So fantastic card for Yuriko, but
outside of that, not that great.
Outside of that, not spectacular. 4 mana to ninjutsu it is too much, and you have to ninjutsu it.
I think
for that ability.
I am speaking to I guess like a minority here. I don't know how many people play it like Edric, because during the MLC I was playing against LJ and he was a huge fan I think of Edric, and he even played it offline with me a few times. And this is just a better flying man. I don't know how much the ninjutsu like offers in terms of utility, because I can't think of any other creature you would want to copy that's also attacking, like it's a very narrow scope in that regard. Like it would be great if you could copy like, say a Dockside or whatever, but then you would have to be attacking with that thing. And that's like that's putting out a risk now. Right. Yeah.
Strictly better than Flying Man is not a high bar these days. The bar that you actually need to cross to get into Edric is, are you cooler than Flying Man? And this card, I'm not convinced that it's cooler. So I don't know if it actually gets into the deck.
Mean, what's the isn't there like a 1-mana pirate with flash, right? That has like a Thrasios ability?
Yeah, it's like the Siren.
Yeah.
It's not Siren Storm Tamer. It's
it's I
play this card. I should know what it's called.
I can't remember the name of it.
It's too late. My card recollection abilities are
gone.
Turning to doo-doo.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Moving along to the next card on our list. We're just chugging through here, man. Next card on the list is Nashi Moon Sage's Scion. It is a legendary rat ninja that is a 3/2 that costs 1 and black, 1 colorless black, and has ninjutsu 3 and black. And it says whenever Nashi deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana cost rather than paying its mana cost. So when we look at this card, Charles, obviously, like one of the immediate things is you can use this to set up something like Purity of the Abyss, right?
Okay, so real quick, it was Spectral Sailor, right?
That's what it is.
And I think that is actually the standard now for Flying Man, because it flies as a 1/1, it has flash, and it has a Thrasios ability on top of that. But yeah, with Nashi,
tell us about the ninja rat.
Yeah, so with Nashi,
it's true. It's not.
Okay, yeah. So this is weird. We didn't talk about this as a potential for commander, and the reason why is that I think that there's a lot of things for mono black to overcome before something like this. I think that mono black in general is kind of struggling, unless you're like Keurig or something like that. Yeah. But Nashi himself seems very interesting because you just cast it for free. It does better work than Gonti. I don't think that there's much close of a comparison. What were you saying, Pongo, about or was it you, Callahan, that someone was saying that this was a card that that does what Opposition Agent kind of wanted to do?
It was Bunny on Twitter.
And I think that that's actually, and so to elaborate on that, it was more of the idea that, what's weird is that when people saw Opposition Agent, and I'm one of them, I'm willing to admit that, is that we thought that, this card is going to be busted. It turns out it was just more like a stranglehold type effect. Like nobody would reasonably want to cast a search spell. And so oftentimes Opposition Agent wasn't stealing anything, as the card and flavor and design of it suggested, right? You had your one gotcha moment where someone vamp tutors and you op agent them, but afterwards everyone else is playing very conservatively around it. Whereas I think what's nice about Nashi is that Nashi will do the actual stealing, and the effect is pretty profound. And what's cool about it is that it's not just your opponents, it's yourself. So you can definitely set yourself up kind of like what you just said, Callahan, with vamp tutor, Purity to the Abyss to the top, and then just go off on it. But to get it to work in as your commander and all that stuff, right? Well, you just take on the whole baggage of all the weaknesses that mono black has in its inability to interact, and also, how are you going to get this through in combat as a 3/2 unblocked?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I mean, it's probably the one-time use, right? You're certainly, I would assume, setting this up with a top deck tutor, right, Pongo, and then you're just going through.
Yeah, it's much easier to set this up with an Imperial Seal actually than a vamp tutor if you're doing this. I think.
Mm-hmm. It shouldn't make too much of a difference.
I guess. Hold on. Well, yeah, I guess you're right, because you could just hold priority on the trigger and vamp tutor. I'm thinking more of the fact that you could nobody's going to think that you're going to ninjutsu this out if you Imperial Seal for the turn, and they will probably let the Imperial Seal resolve in a way. Especially if your mana base doesn't look threatening, and then you ninjutsu this, and whereas if you ninjutsu this, hold priority and vamp tutor, I think that's different. But
yeah, I see what you're saying. I kind of imagine in a lot of situations you're often going to be hoping, I think, to do this over multiple turns rather than kind of doing it all in the same turn. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're talking about 5 mana to cheat something into play, paying life after, which is not spectacularly good. It's okay, and some of the big spells that you would be casting off of this would be things like Peer into the Abyss or Ad Naus. So at which point you're getting a decent rate. But the only time I'm excited potentially about that line would be if the card is like Razaketh in particular, right? Like, which is, like I'm getting a discount, I'm spending 5 mana, but I also, now have this creature in play, and, I have this whole line that's essentially set up from that point on. If we're talking about things like Ad Naus, it's kind of just like, if I have the 4 mana and the top deck tutor,
why not just cast Ad Naus?
Why didn't I just tutor for Ad Naus and cast
and it's
that?
the same actual like color requirements as well, because it's 3 generic and a black, and the black for the tutor,
Right.
and that's exactly like the same cost as Ad Naus as well.
Right. So where I imagine, this potentially being interesting is when you pay 3 mana for it and it just kind of connects. And then, you're splitting up potentially something like a Razaketh and Ad Naus, or Peer into the Abyss, or, whatever insert fatty of choice, or just big impactful spell for 3 mana and then 1 mana split across 2 turns. But that's, you're running the risk of getting blocked at that point.
Yeah, and going off with what you said there on that, it's like, I just feel like 3/2 is very easy to block and also very easy to kill. And at 3 mana, like I just feel like you have other more productive things that you could be doing too, right? Like, would you play this over like a Najila or a Timna or like a Rule of Law or like Heuristic Study or just
Does see a lot of cards though.
Mm-hmm.
Like that ability is powerful, but it's on a body that is much easier to block than, like, I would say one of the easy comparisons, which would be like Paco, for instance. Where Paco, like, that thing is like a truck. Like, anything you put in front of it is just getting fucking run over.
Yeah. Scooby-Doo is gonna get you.
Yeah.
All right.
The next card on our list is a card that is from the is again a commander card that you can only get in the set boosters. Is Ruthless Technomancer. The art on this card confuses the hell out of me because I can't tell what the face is.
Yeah, I was gonna like, what is going on with that face?
I thought it was a rat at first, but it's not. It's a human wizard.
Yeah.
That's a 2/4 that costs 3 colorless and a black, and when it ETBs, you may sacrifice another creature you control. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to that creature's power. Also has an activated ability, costs 2 colorless and a black that sacrifice X artifacts. Return target creature card with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X can't.
2 generic and a black, by the way.
2 generic and black. Okay. So Pongo, there's obviously some dockside lines you can do this. I believe there's a Dargo line. I believe I remember Nathan Jones talking about that on Twitter as well.
Yeah. Where my mind immediately goes with this card is to Korvold. I think that's like the obvious place for this card, where in the past, that deck, and maybe still is, as far as I don't know. I'm not an expert on Korvold or anything. Was playing like Corpse Dance and using like a sack outlet plus Dockside plus Corpse Dance to go infinite that way. This requires your Dockside to make fewer treasures, and it's a creature, those are both very, very relevant upsides for that deck for making infinite treasure tokens. So and also, like, it just sacrifices things, right? Like, sign me up if I'm Korvold, right? Makes treasures. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of just everything that deck could want in a card. So yeah, I think the decks that are happy to have this are like super, super excited to have this card. And otherwise it's not, a total game breaker or anything like that. But I expect it to be pretty obnoxious in, like, specifically Korvold and like potentially Dargo as well. As far as the art, I did find a big version of the art, and it turns out the guy is just like incredibly ugly. So just like look at the face and imagine just like a really ugly face, and like maybe that'll make more sense.
I guess. What do you think of this, Charles?
Similar thoughts to what Pongo just said. I think I also saw the tweet from Nathan, but I didn't really look too much into it. I feel like this card is always on the cusp of, like, starting an infinite loop, but I can't actually as Pongo was talking about like dockside and stuff, I can't actually like wrap my mind on anything like too efficient to like get this to like loop very like efficiently.
Holy shit, there is a face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he is ugly as sin.
This is what happens when you dabble in black and not mono white.
I thought it was like a rat with its nose up when I first saw it.
I thought that too, but then I immediately checked the typing. It's like, nope, that's a human.
Yeah.
That's a human, all right. What the hell's...
I stared at this card so many times trying to figure out what that art was.
Okay. But yeah, like, I think, like, the card... I might be missing something, and someone else is, like, you know, thinking, like, 4 levels deep and has realized that, you know, oh, there is this really efficient combo loop they can do with it. But in my library and knowledge of combos and cards and stuff, I feel like whatever you're going to do with this to go infinite, it seems like it's going to be very convoluted. It seems really nice as a value engine though, for sure. But other than that, I don't know what else to make of it. And I guess like there's the question of like, you know, can you justify that for 4 mana as a 2/4 creature, right?
I know the Dargo players are excited about it.
Yeah, I think like
it seems very good there.
I think that specifically for Dargo, you know, sacking that Dargo is going to feel really good, right?
I love that in our notes. I don't know who wrote this, but someone smarter than me could find it in all line with this. I think that is. I think that's Phoenix. That is really funny.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the same thing for me. It's like I don't know how you can go infinite with this yet, right? Oh, but it is a wizard, so yeah, you could do something with this in a Nala, but I just don't know, and I don't know. Like 4 mana in an annul.
You could get 2 of them. That's actually
4 mana in an Annula line versus just straight up, you know, Spellseeker. You know, it's like
right.
I can't even think of a placement for this that like when you think about all the other options that you have for creating treasures and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, the next card is Weaver of Harmony. It is a 2/2 enchantment creature snake druid. This one doesn't have the weird enchantment subtype nonsense. That costs 1 colorless and a green. That says other enchantment creatures you control get +1/+1. Has an activated ability that costs green and requires to tap it. That says copy target activated or triggered ability you control from an enchantment source. You may choose new targets for the copy. And mana abilities can't be targeted, it says in there. So, Charles, with this, there is some stuff with like, there was an aura we had talked about that it can target, it can kind of create some sort of, I don't know if it's infinite, but it can go pretty far.
Sorry, I'm just paralyzed because I actually looked at the image that Pongo sent and I was like, wow, this guy really is.
It's horrifying.
Dude, oh my god, he must have sacrificed something.
Yeah.
But Weaver of Harmony. Okay, so yeah, we were talking.
That's some dark magic.
Yeah, that's like Palpatine levels of like you did.
Yeah, like
yeah,
Voldemort levels. Like
what happened to your nose, buddy? It's just not there. But yeah, Weaver of Harmony. Yeah, speaking about snake face guy, here's a snake druid, right? Weaver of Harmony. I'm like digging through like a Discord conversation because I believe Ari Nied, like the former member of the White Color Council who also worked on this, thought that Weaver of Harmony was a mistake, and not specifically that the card was busted or anything like that, but more like this probably could have just been a white card, and she was probably harping on the fact that, you know, this is an anthem effect for enchantments, right? And for enchantment creatures, and that seems like a pretty white ability. And the copy effect feels like, you know, well, that actually feels more like a blue effect.
Yeah.
Right. So like
it's pretty new. You could justify it
exactly
in just about any of the enchantment colors.
Especially within Bant, right? And so in Ari's view, like, you know, this could have gone better in white, and that actually does make sense because white, I think, can easily like the old Heliod, which I play, like would have benefited from something like this as well, but to talk about the effect, we don't really care about the Anthem effect. We're not really here to talk about this card's design either in any way. It's green now, so whatever. And like what I'm going to get at mostly is like, you know, the copy effect. And earlier we were talking about like what could you really even copy, and like copying a Mystic Study effect or like a Mystic Remora trigger just does not seems
super low impact.
Yeah, like what you like you copy the cumulative upkeep trigger for Mystic Remora just because you hate yourself.
Oh boy.
Right. But like copying Sylvan Library, that seems pretty cool. Copying Carpet of Flowers seems pretty cool. But like, you know, outside of that, I like that's only within the realm of green. And then even in the other colors, I think like most of the enchantments that cEDH players play typically just have like static abilities that aren't really triggered abilities, you know? And the ones that do have triggered abilities like Smothering Tithe or like Mystic Studies is like you want to be copying it multiple times, not just once. And so this tap thing here, you know, isn't great. And so
it's a really unique ability. I think like this is the type of card that I'm not a finance person at all. This is the type of card that I feel like could be an interesting long-term spec though. Because like
fucking stonks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Because like we don't have anything else that does this, and it's also like a really efficient rate for the ability.
Yeah.
And it does already have infinite combos, right? Like you can already use this with Curse of Bounty to get, you know, theoretically infinite mana. You just need to have like a couple mana dorks basically, as far as
I will say that like casual players with like greater good might enjoy this and stuff, right? Or like if you're mixing it with other colors like Sneak Attack, right? Because casual players also like that too. You can do that, but like in the realm of,
and you want it for the Shrine deck, right? Because you just copy like one of your Shrine triggers.
I think that's actually the reason why they made this green, is because with Goshen Tai, right? Like you.
Yeah, but it's 5 colors. It could have been any color.
I know, but I think it's the idea is like, well, what if they don't get the other color and they're still stuck on like forests, right? I know. Like I'm face palming this too, because I actually do kind of agree with Ari. Like, you know, you could have just snuck this into white and it would have had more flexibility, like in there as well. And it's not like Goshen Tai is going to like cry shrine tears or anything like that because this is a shrine.
Yeah. The next card on our list is a card that's going to see a lot of different play, which is Containment Construct, which is a 2/1 artifact creature construct that only costs 2 colorless. And it says, when you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. So Pongo, this is a huge thing for like wheel effects, right?
This is a really neat design. You know, and this is just like one amongst a good list of cards that like make me really excited for this set. And you know, I have to, you know, hats off to WotC. Like the creativity on display here is incredible. They did a fantastic job with this set. You know, even though we have been griping about a few cards here and there, overall it's a slam dunk. And this card is really neat, and feels, you know, potentially quite powerful and quite busted. You know, it turns out like a lot of cards have you discard cards as a cost, and you know, just having this in play, or you know, they have you discard cards as part of their resolution or whatever, and having this in play kind of just mitigates all of that. It's not once per turn, it's just, and it's not even like one of the cards that you discard, it's just all of them. So like every card that you discard you get to cast. So it's like really like kind of just extending, you know, the intention here is channel cards, but like, you know, extending all of your Faithless Lootings, your wheel effects, your LEDs. If you're playing Survival of the Fittest, you know, people are already messing around with Survival of the Fittest lines with this card.
So good with Survival.
Yeah,
it's also really good with LED. It's like,
oh,
you know,
it's also good with
so many discard effects.
It's also good with Necropotence. Yeah, because
Sort of.
It's
The timing's a little
right?
weird with that one.
Oh, well, like, it's weird just because what it does is that if you get silenced, right, and you have Necropotence out, you could actually do this during the cleanup step where you go to discard and the silence effect gets cleaned up. And so you can actually now cast your spells.
But they have to be instants.
Right? I mean, there's Emergent Zone for that.
Cast the instance. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, if you have Emergent Zone in place, certainly. Yeah. It's, like Necropotence is a good enough card on its own that, like, if this card makes it a little bit better, that's cool. So I mean, this is the type of card that is going to really push people's creativity, I think, and people are going to find lots of really neat lines based on this card. And like as new cards are printed, it's going to continue being played in certain places. It's kind of like archetype defining in some ways, like it's line defining. It's not a strict power upgrade for any particular deck. I'm not even convinced that if you're doing like LED wheel stuff, like in your breach deck, that you necessarily want to be playing this. Sort of generically, it's not quite good enough for that. But once you start really building around it, in a sort of a more dedicated way, it becomes really, really neat. So again, I feel like archetype defining type card, more so than, like format all-star, but cool, really excited to see it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it, but I know turbo players are going to do something dumb with it where you can just go like Ancient Tomb or City of Traders, your land for turn, play this, play LED, dump your hand, wheel, and then...
It's like so many cards that you need to have.
That's like not an unreasonable expectation of an opening hand, though. Like,
I just think that...
I consider that unreasonable.
I mean, like... Overall, in general, I think the card offers a lot of flexibility. I agree with Pongo here, and earlier I was just saying, like, man, this is an uncommon, and like, what did we get back in Innistrad? The one that made zombies, but only once per turn, right? And that was a rare, and then we have this as an uncommon, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
There's like so many like casual commanders too that kind of, I think, incidentally have you like discard cards like for random effects. You know what I mean? Like I can see those decks just wanting to play this card. This is probably going to be an uncommon where the foils are going to be worth a few dollars. Yeah. So I would, don't be surprised to see that, this being like a $4 card foil and being like, why? And that's really unique text.
Yeah. And I was earlier offline, I was saying about like how like this could have easily just be printed as a rare given how this triggered abilities is completely unrestricted. And you look at like other effects, but to explain why they could have possibly just decided like, no, we're going to print this as an uncommon, was mostly is that it massages certain things out in limited formats. And something that someone might not consider about is that channel effects like have you discard the card, right? So you could actually play the cards that you channeled as well.
Yeah, so we do have a cycle. We're not going to talk about all of them because, well, here, I'll say this. The red one, you will see played in exactly Winota. So you don't need to worry about it. Winota's got you covered. The black one, I doubt you will ever see played. Maybe in Gitrog. Maybe. But that's the only place I could reasonably think to play it. The ones we're going to talk about are the Bant ones. Those are the real good ones. So the first one we're going to talk about here is Otawara Soaring City, which is a legendary land. It makes blue, and that has the channel ability that costs 3 colorless and a blue. You discard it, and it says return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. So, Pongo, when we look at this, this is going to basically, in a lot of decks, just go in over an island, right? Like,
oh yeah, I mean, most of these cards, like the ones that we highlighted as being good, are just, they're so free to play. Like, it's a land slot that's now a spell. Why not?
That gets under a rule of law.
Yep, we're getting there. But the modal double-faced cards were, the good ones have been seeing a fair bit of play. I say that and I think about it more and I'm like, no, you know what? All of them are like kind of like actually seeing play, at least in one place. And, like those are arguably not quite good enough for like higher color decks in certain instances. These, on the other hand, like their abilities are so much cheaper. Like it's kind of crazy.
Right.
Their land slots, they don't hit you on ad nauseum, for example, if that's what you're doing. They're 0 CMC spells from that perspective. They get discounted for having legendary creatures. If you have partners, they can get double discounted, which is so stupid.
Or you play a Ragavan or something.
Or you have
like
a Ragavan in play, incidentally. And then, as you were saying before, like this is a spell that you can play through a lot of different types of stacks and also very difficult to counter, which is both of those are major upsides over like the modal double-faced cards, which, as I was saying before, those are cards that we were previously very excited about because it's just like, extra spells in my land slots. And this really just pushes that envelope like crazy. Right. So these are powerful. The only real potential downside to them is, if you're going to be running like as many as possible, the 3 Bant ones, let's say, is you might be giving up on some fixing if you're in higher color decks. Yeah. And, some people are already saying like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Just give me the extra spells that beat Rule of Law. And like, I'll figure out the mana after, which might be a little bit greedy, but like, we'll see. These are really powerful, so it could be
cEDH players greedy.
No, never, not at all.
Doesn't sound right.
I've never met a greedy cEDH player in my life.
Never.
I don't have a reflection in the mirror either.
The next one that we're going to talk about here is the white one, which is Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire. Which is coincidentally the white one. And its channel activation costs 2 in a white, and it deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. And it, again, this ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. So Charles, this just goes in over a plane, right? Planes, right? Like it's really good.
Yeah, I'm subbing this in all my white decks already. It's good. I mean, like, and Yoshimaru really likes it too. And
it also kills Crom.
Yes, it kills Crom. It kills Crom. It kills Winota. It kills an Eidolon of Rhetoric if they're blocking with Eidolon. Like, you could be swinging at someone with Tymna, and someone's just like, block with Eidolon, and it's like, cool, it's dead, right? And and it's like, gotcha, right? And then suddenly, they feel really bad about it. And, one of the things about these channel lands is that they're all colorless. As you mentioned earlier, Callahan, right? Giver Runes becomes really clutch in these types of scenarios to protect you from these lands. But these lands fly under the radar for so many things, like not only just against counter spells, but also like, protection effects like Mom, and also, stacks effects like Rule of Law, right? The only stacks piece that really interacts with them on this axis is literally Suppression Field, and nobody plays that but me. And so,
I think like hex, like things that can like give hex proof.
Oh yeah, sure. Good. But like,
and then like, but I think like the fact that people are like talking about playing like Tail's End, right? Yeah. And Blacksmith skill really shows you like how much powerful, how much they
invoke the fear of God into these players. Yeah. I mean, like, also like I mentioned Suppression Field, but the fact that they have built-in cost reduction even like invalidates an effect like Suppression Field. Like there's like these lands are very powerful, and they're not even from Zendikar, right? Where we might have expected this from, right? It's actually really crazy when you think about that. Like utility lands that in some ways like have surpassed Zendikar's level of like, oh yeah, lands matter. It's like Kamigawa. lands matter. And yeah, it's also like, it's also kind of weird to think about it, but like, you know, if you pay this for, I feel less happy paying 3 mana for this in the same way that I feel less happy paying 4 mana for Otawara, right? Like, but if I'm paying like 2 mana for it, you know, it gets a little bit better. 1 white mana for this is perfect, right? And the reason why I say this is because the effect is comparable to white instance, like I think Gideon's Reproach and things like that. And like 3 just doesn't feel great. Like if I'm paying 4 mana for a bounce spell, right? That really sucks actually. Yeah. But like you have so many efficient bounce spells. Like you really want like I'm okay paying like a surcharge in like 1 in a blue for, you know, a tax effect that for like a taxed bounce spell, because I'm flying under the radar from so many types of interactions. But like I like, you kind of have to ask yourself, is like 4 mana really there? And so those are some things to think about, which is a good segue to the third one that we're going to talk about now, because the channel cost for that is just absolutely ridiculous.
This is an insanely pushed card.
Yeah.
And this is Boseiju Who Endures, which is a green, taps for green, not colorless anymore. It makes green now. With the channel ability, it costs 1 colorless and a green. You discard it. Yeah, 1 generic and a green. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land card with a basic land type, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffles, and again, it has the legendary cost reducer. The fact that this is 2 mana most of the time, and then incidentally just is a better Nature's Claim, like Pongo, like why was this made?
Look, everyone looked at this card. Like, I don't think we even need to talk about it. In some sense, like, this is a card that if you don't know why it's good, right, you just kind of like.
Well, we've highlighted the reasons why it's good, right? But then on top of that, it's also at a rate where, like, even when you're not getting the discount, it's an acceptable rate, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's basically Assassin's Trophy. So, you know, the fact that sometimes you're going to pay 1 mana for it is kind of just like the cherry on top again. Remembering that these are lands, right? Like at the end of the day, these are taking up land slots. So you're just getting extra removal for free. And if you absolutely desperately need to make your land drop, well, you know, you've got it. So, yeah, I mean, like this card is going to be a multi-format staple, at least in some quantities in a wide variety of decks. You know, really, really powerful way to beat like a lot of hate pieces that you normally wouldn't be able to kind of just in your main deck.
Interacts with Underworld Breach too.
Stuff like that. Yep. Uncounterable way to kill an Underworld Breach.
Get rid of a Rhystic Study
cEDH
before they even draw a card.
Yeah, without triggering it, exactly. So, I mean, you know, it sucks to give somebody a land, you know, and to ramp them in that spot specifically. But, you know, like, I think with the power level of certain cards like Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora, you can oftentimes justify that. I'm personally not the biggest fan of using, like, Assassin's Trophy on a Rhystic Study, but I'm, like, pretty greedy when it comes to my removal anyway. But anyway, you know, it's neither here nor there. This card is kind of just nuts, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a land slot. Like, who cares? Like, it kind of invalidates a lot of the downsides.
I feel like this is the most exciting thing green has got in a really long time. In like
2 years,
actually.
Practically, yeah.
Like,
it's like they heard us saying, you know, like at the end of like 2020, oh yeah, what was the best green card? Like, I don't know, Allosaurus Shepherd or whatever we got in 2020. And then 2021, we were like,
Endurance.
Like, yeah, Endurance. And then, well, all right, we have a front runner already for best green card. Well, green.
This isn't a green card.
I mean, yeah, it goes into green decks.
You could qualify it, but
yeah,
it is a colorless card by definition.
We'll argue the minutia of that, you know, at the end of the year, I suppose.
I mean, your commander has to at least be green in order to run this card. Yeah,
right.
That's true.
And,
It does have green in its color identity. Yeah.
yeah. And so,
Well,
I guess I'll add one caveat to that is because I talked about this with Josh when we were going over some of the recent cards that had been spoiled at the time. This card was one of them. Like if you hit like a Hermit Druid style deck, I think they just don't get anything because it's a basic land type that they can search for, right?
no, it's not.
Well, no, it's a land with
or a land with a basic
land with a basic
type.
So
land
they
type,
can get a
right?
duel.
They can get a duel.
Oh, they can get a duel. I forgot about that. What I was thinking that they could get is a Mystic Sanctuary, because that is a land with a basic land that is a land that has a basic land type, which is island, which actually seems like pretty powerful. And so I think like if you're using that card, I think that's the only time where you would feel like, well, I don't want to look like an idiot if I play this card. But that's like a very like corner case scenario. Like in general, this card is really, really good. And yeah, I feel like this is the kind of greed that you don't really get punished for easily by.
Yeah. And it deals with rule of law, and it makes ad nauseum better, and all that. But anyway, old man Pongo's getting tired. We can see it in his face. So that about
obvious, huh?
that about wraps things up for us here today. Just a quick reminder: you can follow us over on Twitter at SculptyBoys, or you can find a direct link in the link tree in the description below. You can follow Pongo at Team Turn 3, and you can follow Charles at Ilvaldi on Twitter. And there is a dog on our screen now.
This is our little Yoshimaru.
Oh my gosh, that's so adorable.
Look at it.
My dog was poking her. Oh, she's right here.
Yeah, the mono white guy has a white dog. Okay.
And it didn't mess up your camera and microphone while we were recording, like my beast.
Oh no, she is a rascal. She's actually like the worst, right? Like
she's so cute.
Everybody says
your dog is quite
everybody
cute.
says that she's really cute, but like no, she is literally the devil in sheep's clothing.
Go over there
right now.
If you want to help us out and help support us, you can go to the patreon.com/themindsculptors, or check out the link in the description. A few shout outs to some of our top tier patrons of Justin, Michael Levine, CZ, David Snavely, Dionyches, Jason Bialk, Lone Wolf, Matt Boehner, and Senior Coupon. Thank you again for joining us, and from all of us here at the Mind Sculptors, I'm Callahan, and we'll see you next time.
I'm in line with the stars, I'm in sync with the earth. 10 toes deep, flower child from the turf. I never switch sides, like even when I die, I'ma ride for the squad. Ladder ties in the hearse. I've been on the vibe, kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the middle of the time of my life. I never so packed for the stack, never lied on the rap. Got a bag from the way that I write it. Queen looking Tyson, do that ass survive, doing 80 to the house. Then I hit it to the sky, change haters on a tirade. Talking to the grip in the face, be still, let that hate stuff fade. We all want the same, we all want a meal in the safe. I wanna live like I'm trying to reach enlightenment. Trail spill from my lips, feel big from the bib. Take a sip till I pass out. Try and get grit, but it don't make sense, cause you can lose life on this fast route. Yeah, turn thoughts to a cash cow. I might flip that to the glass house. I don't need the accolades, I'm in love with the chase. I just wanna eat, save a spot at the table. Beast with the slap, hit myself on the map. You long with the wind, but we knowing that it's cap. 5-hour flights, couple nights